I'm Amanda Parker, 29 years old, and 3 days before my dream wedding, I found a note on my pillow from my parents. Weddings OFF. Expect a call from my lawyer. My stomach dropped as I read those words. No explanation, no warning. My fiancé Jason wasn't answering his phone. What could he have possibly done that my parents discovered? I didn't argue with them. They'd never steered me wrong before. But what happened in the next 48 hours would unravel my entire world and reveal the stranger I almost married. If you're watching from somewhere warm today, hit that like button and subscribe to follow my journey through heartbreak to the shocking truth behind the man who almost became my husband. When I look back now, I can see the warning signs I missed. But at the time, everything seemed so perfect. I'd built a successful career as a pediatric nurse at Boston Children's Hospital. I loved my job, my cozy apartment in Cambridge, and my tight circle of friends. I wasn't actively looking for love when Jason Thompson walked into my life at the hospital's annual charity gala. Jason stood out immediately, tall, with perfectly styled dark hair and a smile that lit up the ballroom. He was a pharmaceutical sales representative who'd recently moved to Boston, and he had this magnetic confidence that drew people to him. When he approached me at the bar and started talking, I was immediately charmed by his attentiveness. He remembered every detail of our conversation, asked thoughtful questions about my work with children, and made me laugh harder than I had in months. Our first date was dinner at a small Italian restaurant in the North End. He arrived with a single lily, my favorite flower, which I'd mentioned offhandedly during our first meeting. That was Jason's specialty. Remembering the little things and using them to make you feel special. One date turned into 3, then 10, and before I knew it, we were spending every weekend together. I've never connected with anyone the way I connect with you, he told me 6 months in, as we walked along the Charles River on a crisp fall evening. Looking back, I should have questioned how someone so seemingly perfect could be single at 34. But love has a way of clouding judgment. At 18 months together, Jason proposed during a weekend trip to the Berkshires. He'd arranged everything: a private dinner overlooking the mountains, a photographer hidden to capture the moment, and a vintage diamond ring that he claimed had belonged to his grandmother. I said yes through tears of joy, never suspecting that every word about the ring's history was a lie. My parents, Robert and Linda Parker, were initially thrilled. Mom immediately started planning how we could transform their waterfront estate in Marblehead into the perfect wedding venue. Dad shook Jason's hand firmly and welcomed him to the family. They threw us an elegant engagement party where Jason charmed every relative with stories of his childhood in Seattle and his ambitious career goals. But around the 3-month mark of our engagement, subtle shifts began. Mom would call with random questions about Jason's family, whom I'd never met because they were scattered across the country. Dad began inviting Jason to golf, then returning with a slight furrow in his brow. When I asked what was wrong, he'd simply say, "Nothing concrete, sweetheart. Just getting to know him better." I dismissed their growing concerns as typical parental overprotectiveness. After all, I was their only daughter. Of course they'd scrutinize the man I planned to marry. Jason had explanations for everything. His parents were too elderly to travel for frequent visits. His college friends had drifted apart after graduation. His previous long-term relationship ended amicably when they wanted different things. Everything sounded reasonable on the surface. As the wedding approached, my life became a whirlwind of dress fittings, menu tastings, and honeymoon planning. Jason was surprisingly involved for a groom, offering opinions on everything from the floral arrangements to the seating chart. He even insisted on handling our joint finances right away, setting up shared accounts that he would manage since he had more experience with investments. I handed over access to my savings without question. After all, we were building a life together. The week of the wedding arrived with perfect June weather. My college roommate flew in from California, my favorite cousin came early to help with decorations, and my grandmother arrived with her traditional family veil that had been worn by Parker brides for generations. The estate looked magical: white tents on the lawn, fairy lights strung through the trees, and an arch of roses for the ceremony overlooking the ocean. The rehearsal dinner on Thursday night was everything I'd dreamed of. 60 of our closest friends and family gathered at my parents' favorite restaurant. Jason gave a beautiful toast about fate bringing us together. My father's speech was shorter than expected, and I noticed him watching Jason with an unreadable expression, but I was too happy to dwell on it. Following tradition, I stayed at my parents' house the night before the wedding while Jason returned to our apartment. Mom hugged me tightly before I went upstairs to my childhood bedroom, whispering, "I love you so much, Amanda." There was something in her voice, a tremor of emotion that seemed excessive even for a mother before her daughter's wedding. I fell asleep surrounded by memories, swim team trophies, photos from high school graduation, the stuffed bear I'd had since infancy. When I woke up at 7 a.m., the house was eerily quiet. No sounds of my mother making coffee or my father reading the newspaper on the porch. I stretched, excited that my wedding day had finally arrived, before noticing a folded piece of paper on my pillow. The handwriting was my father's, precise and unwavering. "Wedding's off. Expect a call from my lawyer." No explanation. No details. Just 9 words that suddenly derailed my entire future. I grabbed my phone and called Jason immediately. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "Something's wrong." My parents left a note canceling the wedding. "Call me ASAP." No response. I called again. Nothing. My hands shook as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Had my parents simply lost their minds? Was this some kind of terrible joke? I waited 30 minutes, trying Jason repeatedly, before deciding to wait until morning. Surely there was a reasonable explanation. Surely my perfect fiancé would call back and we'd sort this all out. I had no idea that by morning, Jason Thompson would have vanished from my life, taking my savings and leaving behind a web of lies that would take me months to fully unravel. The persistent buzzing of my phone jolted me awake at 6:15 a.m. Somehow, I'd fallen back asleep despite the note crushing my world. My screen showed 17 missed calls, 3 from my maid of honor Rachel, 5 from bridesmaids, and the rest from vendors confirming cancellations. My parents weren't answering their phones. "The Parkers asked us to remove everything by noon," the wedding planner texted. "Please advise on where to send your personal items." My head spinning, I threw on clothes and drove to my parents' house, just 10 minutes away. The grand estate that had been transformed for my wedding was now being dismantled by a crew of workers. The white tent stood half-collapsed on the lawn. Flower arrangements were being loaded into vans. The magical setting we'd created was disappearing as quickly as my dreams. "I'm sorry, but your parents left strict instructions," the wedding planner, Meredith, explained when I confronted her. Her usually warm demeanor was replaced with cautious professionalism. "They canceled everything last night around midnight. They've covered all cancellation fees." "Where are they?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "They didn't say. Just that they'd be unreachable today, and that the wedding was canceled due to..." She hesitated, checking her tablet, "due to circumstances beyond their control that made the union impossible." I tried Jason again. Still straight to voicemail. Panic rising, I drove to our apartment, hoping to find him there with some explanation. The building looked normal from outside, no hint that my life was imploding. When I unlocked the door, the first thing I noticed was the silence. No coffee brewing. No shower running. No Jason. "Jason?" I called out, moving through our home. The closet door in our bedroom stood open, revealing empty hangers where his suits had hung. His dresser drawers were pulled out, emptied of contents. His toiletries had vanished from the bathroom. It was as if he'd been erased. A knock at the door made me jump. Our neighbor Mrs. Castillo stood there, concern etching her kind face. "Amanda, dear, is everything all right? I saw Jason leaving with suitcases last night around 11. He seemed in quite a hurry." My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor. Jason had fled. My parents had canceled the wedding. And I had no idea why. Mrs. Castillo helped me to the couch and made tea I couldn't drink. My phone rang. Rachel, finally getting through. "What the hell is happening?" she demanded. "I just got a text that the wedding's off." "I don't know," I whispered. "Jason's gone. My parents are gone. Everything's gone." 20 minutes later, Rachel burst through my door, still in pajamas, her face a mask of concern. She held me while I sobbed, piecing together the fragments I knew, which wasn't much. "This doesn't make sense," Rachel said, pacing. "Jason adored you. Your parents adored Jason. Something must have happened." I nodded, wiping tears with the back of my hand. Dad's note mentioned a lawyer. What could Jason have done that's so terrible? My father needs legal representation. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Do you have access to any of Jason's accounts? Email? Phone? Anything? No, he was always private about his. I stopped, remembering. His work laptop. He sometimes leaves it in the hall closet when he doesn't have sales calls. We found the sleek silver computer in its case, tucked behind winter coats. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the power button. This feels wrong, I said. Rachel's expression hardened. What feels wrong is your fiancé disappearing the night before your wedding. Something's very off, Amanda. We need answers. I knew she was right. With shaking hands, I turned on the laptop. The password screen appeared, and my heart sank. Then I remembered. I'd seen Jason enter it once. The name of his first dog plus his birth year. Cooper 2019, I typed. The screen unlocked. What I found would shatter the last remnants of my world and reveal that the man I loved had never actually existed at all. The laptop's desktop was meticulously organized, folders labeled by client names, sales regions, and quarterly reports. Nothing immediately suspicious. But a folder titled Personal Finance caught my attention. Try that one, Rachel urged, sitting beside me on the couch. Inside were dozens of Excel spreadsheets with cryptic names. I clicked on one labeled AP_withdrawals. My breath caught as I recognized my own bank account numbers in the document. Jason had been tracking systematic withdrawals from my savings, small enough amounts that I might not notice individually, but totaling over $42,000 over the past year. That's impossible, I whispered. I would have noticed. But would I? Jason had insisted on managing our finances once we got engaged. I'd given him my online banking passwords, trusting him completely. Keep looking, Rachel said grimly. The next folder contained emails, hundreds of them, between Jason and someone named Melissa. I clicked on the most recent. Can't wait to see you next weekend, baby. Just one more month of this charade, and we'll have everything we need. The condo in Chicago is perfect. You're going to love it. Dated 3 days ago. My stomach clenched as I opened another. Ring is sized and ready. Don't worry, completely different style than hers. She'll never know. Love you madly. Attached was a photo of an engagement ring on a woman's hand. Not my hand. Not my ring. Rachel cursed under her breath. He's engaged to someone else. More emails revealed the sickening truth. Jason Thompson was simultaneously engaged to Melissa in Chicago, using money from my accounts to finance their life together. There were photos of them, vacation selfies, intimate moments, plans for their future, all while he was building a fictional future with me. There's more, I said, my voice hollow as I opened another folder. This one contained bank statements from Jason's employer showing discrepancies in client payments. Sales commissions directed to personal accounts. Expense reports with inflated numbers. Systematic embezzlement totaling nearly $200,000. This is why my parents canceled everything, I realized, the pieces falling into place. Somehow they found out. Rachel held my hand as tears streamed down my face. He's a con man, Amanda. A complete fraud. The devastation hit me in waves. Every memory, every moment we'd shared was tainted. When he'd surprised me with expensive gifts, had that been my own money he was spending? When he'd talked about our future home, had he been planning his escape? The man I'd loved, the man I'd planned to spend my life with, had never existed. My phone rang, startling us both. An unfamiliar number with a Boston area code. Ms. Parker? This is Andrew Collins from First National Bank Fraud Department. We've detected unusual activity on your accounts and have been trying to reach you. The blood drained from my face as he detailed multiple wire transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands, all authorized within the past 24 hours. Nearly $130,000, my entire savings plus a home down payment gift from my grandparents, gone. I didn't authorize those transfers, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm inside me. We've frozen your remaining accounts, but I'm afraid the transferred funds have already cleared. You'll need to come to the branch to file a formal fraud report. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. The magnitude of the betrayal was still sinking in. He's cleaned you out, Rachel said quietly. This wasn't just about marrying you. This was about taking everything. Sadness gave way to something else, a simmering rage that burned through the shock. This wasn't just heartbreak. This was criminal. I need to find him, I said, standing up suddenly. Amanda, no. We should call the police. And tell them what? That my fiancé is a liar? That's not illegal. But theft is. Fraud is. I need proof that he did this deliberately. I returned to the laptop, searching for anything that might indicate where Jason had gone. In the trash folder, I found a deleted email confirmation for a suite at the Langham, one of Boston's most luxurious hotels. Reservation for 2 nights, starting yesterday. He's still in Boston, I said, grabbing my keys. Let's go. Rachel tried to talk me out of confronting him, but the determination in my eyes must have convinced her it was useless. Instead, she insisted on driving, worried my emotional state would make me dangerous behind the wheel. As we headed toward downtown Boston, I tried to imagine what I would say when I came face to face with the stranger I'd almost married. Would he deny everything? Try to charm his way out of it? Run? What I couldn't possibly anticipate was that this confrontation would not only expose Jason's lies, but would connect me with the one person who understood exactly what I was going through, because she was living the same nightmare. The Langham Hotel stood imposing and elegant in downtown Boston, its limestone facade a symbol of luxury and discretion. The doorman greeted us with a practiced smile as we entered the opulent lobby with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors. I felt wildly out of place in my jeans and wrinkled t-shirt, eyes puffy from crying, but I was beyond caring about appearances. I need to find Jason Thompson, I told the front desk attendant, struggling to keep my voice steady. He's staying here. I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can't confirm guests' information, the young man replied with a polite but firm smile. Rachel stepped forward. Listen, this is an emergency. Her fiancé has stolen over $100,000 and disappeared. We know he's here. The attendant's expression didn't change. I suggest contacting the authorities if you believe a crime has been committed. Just as I was about to argue further, I saw him. Jason, walking through the lobby from the direction of the elevators, looking relaxed in designer jeans and a blue button-down I'd given him for Christmas. And he wasn't alone. A tall woman with auburn hair walked beside him, her hand comfortably entwined with his. On her finger glittered an engagement ring. Jason. The name tore from my throat before I could stop myself. He froze, his face registering shock before quickly composing into something unreadable. For a moment, I saw something I'd never witnessed before, calculation behind his eyes as he assessed the situation. Amanda, he said smoothly, walking toward me with the perfect amount of concern. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? My voice rose, drawing attention from nearby guests. My wedding was supposed to be tomorrow. You disappeared. My parents canceled everything. You emptied my bank accounts. The woman beside him stiffened. Jason, what is she talking about? Who is this? Jason placed himself between us, lowering his voice. Amanda, you're clearly upset. Let's talk about this privately. No, I said firmly, stepping around him to face the woman. I'm Amanda Parker. Until yesterday, I was engaged to this man. We were supposed to get married tomorrow at my parents' estate in Marblehead. The woman's face drained of color. That's impossible. Jason and I have been engaged for 3 months. We're closing on our condo in Chicago next week. Melissa? I asked, recognizing the name from the emails. She nodded slowly, her eyes starting between Jason and me. Ladies, please, Jason interjected, his charm evaporating as he realized his 2 worlds were colliding. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I laughed, the sound harsh and unfamiliar even to my own ears. Is that what you call stealing my life savings? Or juggling 2 fiancés in different cities? or the systematic embezzlement from your company. Jason's expression hardened. You've been going through my things. That's an invasion of privacy. Privacy? Melissa echoed, stepping away from him. You told me you were at a pharmaceutical conference this weekend. I found your laptop, I continued, addressing Jason but watching Melissa's reactions. I saw everything, the transfers from my accounts, the emails between you two, the company money you've been stealing. Jason's charm disappeared completely, replaced by cold anger. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. And so can the bank's fraud department, who called me this morning about the suspicious transfers you made. A small crowd had gathered, hotel staff hovering uncertainly at the edges. Jason grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my skin. You're making a scene over nothing, he hissed. I can explain everything if you'd just be reasonable. I wrenched away from his grip. Don't touch me. The only thing I want from you is my money back. And what about my money? Melissa demanded, her initial shock transforming into fury. The down payment for our condo? The investment account we set up? Jason's eyes darted toward the exit. This is ridiculous. You're both hysterical over a simple misunderstanding. Sir, is there a problem here? A security officer approached, responding to the escalating situation. Yes, Melissa and I answered simultaneously. This man is a fraud, I continued. He's stolen money from both of us. He was engaged to us both simultaneously, and he's wanted for embezzlement from his company. That's slander, Jason snapped, but I could see sweat beading on his forehead. I'm checking out. Send my bags down immediately. Actually, sir, the security officer said there seems to be an issue with your bill. The credit card on file has been declined. A flicker of panic crossed Jason's face before he reached for his wallet. I'll pay cash. $7,000, the officer asked skeptically. Jason glanced at the exit again, then suddenly bolted, shoving past an elderly couple and sprinting toward the revolving doors. Stop him, Rachel shouted. Two security guards moved with surprising speed, cutting off his escape. Jason tried to push past them, but was quickly restrained. Let go of me, he shouted, his composed facade completely shattered. This is assault. I haven't done anything. The police are on their way, sir, the first security officer informed him calmly. Hotel policy requires us to resolve any disputes over unpaid bills. I stood trembling, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The man struggling against the security guards bore no resemblance to the charming, attentive partner I thought I'd known. His face was contorted with rage, his movements desperate. Melissa approached me slowly, her own shock evident. How long were you with him? 18 months, I replied. You? 14 months. He told me he traveled for work 3 weeks each month. Pharmaceutical sales territory in the Midwest. We stared at each other. Two women who should have been rivals, but were instead united by the same betrayal. I'm so sorry, I said quietly. I am too, she responded. The police arrived within minutes, taking statements from both Melissa and me while hotel security detained Jason. When they searched him, they found multiple cell phones, credit cards in different names, and over $20,000 in cash. We'll need both of you to come to the station to file formal reports, the officer explained. Based on what you're describing, we're looking at multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. As Jason was led away in handcuffs, he fixed me with a stare of pure hatred. You'll regret this, he said coldly. You have no idea who you're dealing with. For the first time that day, I felt something other than devastation or rage, a cold certainty that I'd had a narrow escape from something far worse than heartbreak. Rachel drove me back to my apartment in silence. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving me hollow and exhausted. I collapsed onto the couch, unable to process everything that had happened. My phone rang, my father's number. Amanda? His voice was tight with worry. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm home, I managed. Dad, what's going on? How did you know about Jason? We hired a private investigator, he said, the words tumbling out quickly. We've been worried for months. Things weren't adding up. The investigator discovered everything 3 days ago, Jason's real identity, his criminal record, the other fiancé. We couldn't let you marry him, sweetheart. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, fresh tears spilling. We tried to call you last night, but you weren't answering. We were afraid if we told you directly, he might react badly. We needed to get you away from him first, even if it meant hurting you temporarily. The realization that my parents had been trying to protect me, that they'd chosen to let me hate them temporarily rather than risk my safety, broke something inside me. I sobbed into the phone, incoherent with relief and gratitude and lingering shock. We're coming home tonight, Dad promised. We'll be there soon. Just stay with Rachel until then. As I hung up, I looked around the apartment I'd shared with a complete stranger, seeing it with new eyes. How many lies had been told within these walls? How many red flags had I missed? The weight of my own blindness crashed down on me, and I surrendered to the exhaustion that had been threatening all day. The man I loved had never existed. The future I'd planned had been built on lies. And I had no idea how I would ever trust anyone again. The morning after the hotel confrontation dawned with harsh clarity. I'd barely slept, my mind replaying every moment with Jason, searching for clues I should have seen. Rachel had stayed over, sleeping on the couch after insisting I shouldn't be alone. My phone rang at 7:30 a.m. Detective Sarah Morales from the Boston Police Department. Miss Parker, we need you to come in today to give a formal statement, she explained. We've uncovered some information about Mr. Thompson, or rather, Mr. Jonathan Sawyer, that you should be aware of. 2 hours later, I sat in a sterile interview room while Detective Morales laid out the truth about the man I'd nearly married. Jonathan Sawyer has been running similar scams across 5 states, she explained, showing me a file with multiple mugshots, all Jason under different names. He targets successful women, creates whirlwind romances, integrates himself into their finances, then disappears with everything he can liquidate. How many others have there been? I asked, my throat tight. We've identified 7 victims over the past decade, but there are likely more who never reported it. Some lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. One woman lost her family business. She slid a document across the table. We've frozen the offshore account where he transferred your money. With your testimony and the evidence from his laptop, we have an excellent case for full recovery. I nodded, still processing. What happens to him now? He's being held without bail due to flight risk. He's facing multiple felony charges here, plus outstanding warrants in Illinois and California. He won't be walking away from this. As I left the police station, I felt lighter somehow. The betrayal still stung, but naming it, fraud, not failure, shifted something in my perception. This wasn't about me being unlovable or naive. This was about a practiced criminal who had perfected his approach. My parents were waiting at my apartment, having flown back from the hotel where they'd been hiding. Mom embraced me immediately, her tears soaking my shoulder. We were so afraid for you, she whispered. When the investigator showed us what he found, Dad stood awkwardly behind her, his expression torn between relief and lingering anger. I wanted to confront him directly, he admitted. But the investigator advised against it. Said men like that can become dangerous when cornered. I showed them the police report, explaining everything that had happened at the hotel. You did exactly right, Dad said, squeezing my hand. I'm so proud of you, Amanda. Many people would have been too embarrassed to pursue this. That afternoon, I met with my bank to begin the arduous process of reclaiming my financial life. The fraud specialist was compassionate but direct. Recovery can take time, she explained. But with the police report and the frozen assets, you're in a better position than most victims. Victim. The word stuck in my throat. I'd never thought of myself that way before, and I wasn't sure I wanted to start now. As I was leaving the bank, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Melissa. From yesterday. Can we talk? We met at a coffee shop halfway between our respective apartments. In the light of day, I could see the same exhaustion in her face that I felt in my bones. I spent all night going through bank statements, she said without preamble. He took almost everything. The condo down payment, my inheritance from my grandmother. Over $200,000. I'm so sorry, I said, meaning it. Don't be. If anything, I should thank you. Another week, and I might have signed the condo paperwork, making me legally responsible for a mortgage he never intended to pay. We compared notes, how we'd met Jason, what he'd told each of us about his past, the red flags we'd ignored. The similarities were eerie. He used the same lines on both of us, Melissa observed. I've never connected with anyone the way I connect with you. Word for word. Something shifted as we talked, the humiliation and self-blame giving way to clarity. This hadn't been about love at all. It had been a calculated operation from the beginning. I'm thinking about starting a support group, Melissa said suddenly. The detective said there are other victims, and there might be more who don't even know yet. That's actually a great idea, I replied, surprising myself. Sharing information might help others spot the warning signs earlier. That evening, for the first time since finding my parents' note, I slept soundly. The nightmare wasn't over. There would be months of legal proceedings, financial recovery, and emotional healing ahead, but I'd taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. The next morning, I woke to several messages from friends who'd heard about the canceled wedding. Instead of hiding in shame, I decided to be honest. I crafted a careful social media post. Many of you have heard that my wedding was canceled suddenly. What you don't know is why. I was the target of a romance scam by a man with multiple identities and victims across the country. He's now in custody facing federal charges. I'm sharing this not for sympathy, but as a warning. Financial abuse can happen to anyone, regardless of education or background. If something feels wrong in your relationship, listen to that feeling. I didn't, and it nearly cost me everything. I hesitated before hitting post, my finger hovering over the button. Sharing this publicly felt terrifying, admitting I'd been fooled so completely. But the thought of preventing even one person from experiencing the same devastation strengthened my resolve. Within hours, the post had hundreds of supportive comments and shares. 3 women messaged me privately with similar stories. One had dated Jason briefly 2 years earlier before her brother's suspicions scared him off. Another was currently involved with someone whose description matched Jason's methods perfectly. For the first time, I saw how my painful experience might serve a greater purpose. The shame that had threatened to consume me transformed into something unexpected, determination to help others recognize what I had missed. The weeks following Jason's arrest passed in a blur of legal meetings, financial paperwork, and therapy sessions. I returned to work, grateful for the hospital's supportive environment and the distraction of caring for my young patients. 1 month after what should have been my wedding day, I sat in the district attorney's office reviewing evidence for the upcoming preliminary hearing. We've identified 2 additional victims in Rhode Island and New Hampshire, the prosecutor explained. Both willing to testify. With your evidence and Melissa's, plus the financial documentation, we have a very strong case. What about my savings? I asked, the question that had been haunting me for weeks. The good news is we've recovered approximately 70% from the Cayman Islands account. The rest was already spent or transferred elsewhere, but restitution will be part of any plea deal or sentencing. It wasn't everything, but it was more than many victims ever saw again. I'd need to rebuild, but I wasn't starting from zero. That evening, I started the process of returning wedding gifts. Each package required a note explaining the cancellation. Instead of vague excuses, I opted for honesty. Thank you for your generous gift. As you may have heard, my wedding was canceled when my fiancé was arrested for fraud and theft. While this isn't the outcome anyone expected, I'm grateful for your support during this difficult time. My parents had been incredible throughout the ordeal, helping me secure my finances and supporting me emotionally without ever saying, "I told you so." Dad had even hired a financial advisor to help me rebuild my savings and create stronger protections for the future. The best revenge is living well, Mom said one evening as we sorted through the last of Jason's belongings that the police had cleared for disposal. And learning from this so it never happens again. She was right. The more I learned about romance scams and financial abuse, the more determined I became to help others protect themselves. I began volunteering at a local domestic violence shelter, sharing my experience during their financial literacy workshops. The shelter director, Grace, invited me to develop a resource guide specifically about recognizing financial manipulation. Your perspective is valuable precisely because you didn't fit the stereotype of a vulnerable target, she explained. You're educated, financially independent, and still fell victim to his manipulation. The guide became a passion project, incorporating warning signs I'd missed and protections I wished I'd put in place. As I researched, I discovered how common these scams were and how rarely they were reported due to victims' embarrassment. Melissa and I continued to meet regularly, our unlikely friendship becoming a source of strength for us both. Together, we founded a support group for romance scam survivors that quickly grew to 15 members. I never thought I'd be grateful for the most humiliating experience of my life, Melissa said during one meeting. But connecting with all of you has shown me I'm not alone. And I'm not stupid for having believed him. Her words resonated with everyone in the room. The shame of being deceived had been as damaging as the financial losses for many of us. Media interest in our story grew as Jason's case progressed through the legal system. A local news station requested an interview about romance scams. My initial instinct was to decline. I didn't want to become the public face of gullibility. But Grace from the shelter helped me reframe my thinking. This isn't about exploiting your pain, she said gently. It's about using your experience to help others. Every time someone shares their story, it makes it easier for the next victim to come forward. I agreed to the interview on one condition, that the focus be on warning signs and resources, not sensationalized details of my relationship. The reporter, to her credit, honored this request. The segment aired during the evening news, presenting a factual account of romance scams with statistics, expert commentary, and my brief testimony about the financial and emotional impacts. I emphasized that these scams worked precisely because they targeted people's capacity for love and trust, qualities that shouldn't be seen as weaknesses. The response was overwhelming. The station's tip line received dozens of calls from people suspecting they or their loved ones were being targeted. The resource guide I developed with the shelter was downloaded over 1,000 times in the first week. 3 women reached out to say they had recognized their own relationships in my story and had taken steps to protect themselves. One had discovered her boyfriend attempting to add himself to her home D. Another found unauthorized credit cards opened in her name. For the first time since finding my parents' note, I felt something like purpose emerging from the pain. The betrayal had nearly broken me, but in rebuilding my life, I was helping others avoid the same fate. You've turned your worst experience into something meaningful, Rachel observed over dinner one evening. Not everyone could do that. I smiled, recognizing the truth in her words. The woman who had blindly trusted Jason could never have imagined standing up in public to discuss being scammed. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and far more compassionate toward others' vulnerabilities. As summer turned to fall, I received an unexpected call from Detective Morales. I thought you'd want to know, she said. Jonathan Sawyer has accepted a plea deal. 15 years with no possibility of parole for 5 years. Full restitution to all identified victims. The prosecutor said your evidence was instrumental in making this happen. After hanging up, I stood at my apartment window, watching the sunset paint the Boston skyline in golds and pinks. 15 years. Justice had been served in a way that many victims never experienced. I realized I no longer jumped when my phone rang. I no longer scrutinized every bank statement with paranoid attention. The hypervigilance that had defined my first months after Jason's arrest was gradually giving way to something healthier. Awareness without fear, caution without paralysis. That evening, I wrote a letter I would never send. Dear Jason, I will not call you Jonathan, because I never knew that man. The person I knew was a fiction, crafted specifically to deceive me. For a long time, I hated you for what you took from me, not just my savings, but my trust, my confidence, my belief in my own judgment. I thought you had destroyed something essential in me. I was wrong. What you broke, I have rebuilt, stronger than before. What you stole, I am reclaiming. The woman who falls apart at betrayal isn't who I turned out to be. For that realization, if nothing else, I can almost thank you. Almost. I sealed the letter and then burned it in my kitchen sink, watching the pages curl and blacken. The past was behind me. What mattered now was what I built from here. ## Part 8. Healing and Life Lessons. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, I sat in a downtown courthouse, watching as Jason, now officially Jonathan Sawyer in all proceedings, was formally sentenced. The judge was unsparing in her assessment. "Mr. Sawyer, you have systematically targeted and exploited the trust of multiple victims, causing not only financial harm but profound emotional damage," she stated, her voice stern. "The court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 5 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution to all victims identified in these proceedings." As he was led away in handcuffs, Jonathan glanced back at the gallery where I sat between Melissa and my father. His expression was unreadable, neither remorseful nor defiant, just empty. I realized with startling clarity that I felt nothing looking at him now. No lingering attachment, no burning hatred. He was simply a stranger who had once occupied space in my life. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered with cameras and microphones. "How does it feel to see him sentenced?" one called out. I paused, considering my answer carefully. "It feels like closure. Not just for me, but for everyone he hurt. Now we can all move forward." And I meant it. The sentencing marked the end of a chapter one was ready to leave behind. The financial restitution would help rebuild my savings, but the real recovery had been internal, learning to trust myself again, to recognize the difference between genuine connection and manipulation. 2 weeks later, I signed a lease on a new apartment across town. The place I'd shared with Jason held too many memories, too many moments of doubt when I wondered if I could have seen the truth sooner. The new space was smaller but brighter, with large windows and no history. My parents helped with the move, Dad insisting on assembling furniture while Mom arranged my kitchen with meticulous care. "I know this past year hasn't been what any of us expected," Mom said as we unpacked boxes of books. "But I've never been prouder of how you've handled it all." "I couldn't have done it without you both," I admitted. "When you left that note, I was so angry at first. I thought you were trying to control my life. I never imagined you were saving it." Dad looked up from the bookshelf he was assembling. "Leaving that note was the hardest thing we've ever done. We knew you might never forgive us if we were wrong. But we also knew we couldn't live with ourselves if we were right and said nothing," Mom added. The realization of how much they'd risked to protect me, including our relationship, humbled me completely. "Thank you for loving me enough to risk losing me," I said softly. That night, alone in my new apartment, I reflected on how much had changed. The woman who had eagerly handed over passwords and account access to her fiancé without question was gone. In her place stood someone more cautious, but not cynical, more independent, but not isolated. The support group Melissa and I had started had grown to 35 members across 3 states, with weekly virtual meetings and a resource website. Many members were in various stages of recovery, some still dealing with legal proceedings, others rebuilding credit scores and savings, all processing the emotional aftermath of betrayal. "Your story helped me come forward," one new member had told me recently. "I was too ashamed to admit I'd been scammed until I heard you speak at that community workshop." Those moments of connection had become the unexpected gift of this painful journey. By sharing my vulnerability, I'd created space for others to acknowledge theirs without shame. My work at the domestic violence shelter had evolved into a formal position developing financial literacy programs. We'd recently received a grant to expand our curriculum statewide, focusing specifically on recognizing and escaping financial abuse. Financial control is often the invisible chain that keeps people in dangerous situations, Grace, the shelter director, had explained when offering me the role. "Your perspective bridges a gap in our programming." The irony wasn't lost on me, that my greatest humiliation had become my most valuable credential. But I'd learned that transformation often begins at the point of greatest pain. 8 months after the non-wedding, I decided to take the trip that should have been my honeymoon, a 2-week exploration of the Greek islands. My parents worried about me traveling alone, but I needed to prove to myself that I could navigate the world independently again. You can't let fear make your decisions, I told them. That's what I've learned from all this. The trip was transformative in ways I hadn't anticipated. Away from the daily reminders of betrayal and recovery, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been overshadowed by trauma, my curiosity, my sense of adventure, my ability to connect authentically with new people. On a sunset cruise around Santorini, I met a group of women from Australia celebrating their friend's divorce. We call it her liberation tour, one explained with a laugh. When I shared a condensed version of my story, their response was immediate and genuine. "You dodged a bullet, love," the recently divorced woman said, raising her glass. Better to find out before than after. We spent the evening trading stories of resilience and renewal, strangers becoming friends through the universal language of overcoming heartbreak. I took their joyful solidarity with me when I returned home, a reminder that there was life, rich, meaningful life, after devastation. Back in Boston, I received an unexpected email from a woman in Seattle. "You don't know me," it began, "but your social media post about romance scams saved me from making a terrible mistake. The man I was dating matched every warning sign you described. When I confronted him, he disappeared overnight. Thank you for your courage in sharing your experience." I printed that email and pinned it to my bulletin board as a reminder that vulnerability, when channeled purposefully, becomes strength. My personal pain had created a ripple effect of protection for others, a purpose I could never have anticipated when I found that note from my parents. As the one-year mark of my canceled wedding approached, Melissa suggested we organize a dodged bullet celebration with other members of our support group. "Not to trivialize what we've been through," she explained, "but to acknowledge how far we've come. To reclaim the day." The gathering was small but meaningful, 12 survivors sharing stories not of victimization but of recovery. One woman had started her own business after rebuilding her credit. Another had become an advocate for stronger legislation against romance scams. Each person represented a different path through the same dark forest of betrayal and back into light. "I never thought I'd say this," I told the group, "but in some ways, I'm grateful for what happened. Not for the betrayal itself, but for what it taught me about my own resilience. About the people who truly love me. About the strength that comes from sharing our most painful experiences." It wasn't that the hurt had disappeared entirely. There were still moments when memories ambushed me, a song that played during a dinner with Jason, a place we'd visited together, the occasional dream from which I woke disoriented and sad. But those moments no longer define me. What defined me now was the life I was building, one decision, one day, one authentic connection at a time. A life grounded in hard-won wisdom rather than naive trust. A life where vulnerability became a conscious choice rather than an unconscious default. The note my parents left, those 9 words that shattered my world, had ultimately saved me from a far more devastating discovery after marriage. Their intervention, while painful, had been the greatest act of love, demonstrating that sometimes protection comes in forms we don't immediately recognize as care. As I look toward the future now, I carry both caution and hope in equal measure. I've learned that trust must be earned incrementally, not given completely on charm alone. I've discovered that my capacity to love remains intact despite betrayal. And most importantly, I've found that the darkest moments can become unexpected doorways to purpose and meaning. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with your own experience or concerns, please know you're not alone. The shame that keeps us silent is what allows these cycles to continue. Your intuition is worth listening to, and your boundaries worth defending. Have you ever ignored red flags in a relationship because everything else seemed perfect? Share your experience in the comments. Your story might help someone else recognize warning signs they're currently missing. Don't forget to subscribe if you found this valuable, and remember, sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads directly to finding what you truly need. Thank you for listening to my journey from heartbreak to healing.